Hi everybody, my name's Julia from Bobbins and Buttons. My business and my channel are all about helping people learn to sew and make clothes that they love. So today I'm going to share a tutorial for how to make thumb holes. You'll often see thumb holes in sweatshirts and hoodies, and there's lots of patterns, but that feature isn't always added to the pattern. So if you want to add that to your to any sweatshirt or hoodie pattern that's got a cuff, this should help you add that feature. So I'm actually going to show you a tutorial for fingerless gloves, but it's exactly the same method. A little while ago I shared a tutorial for an upcycled tank top, so I'll add a link below for that, but during the video I promised I would share the things that I did with the remaining pieces of the upcycled jumpers, and one of the things that I had left was sleeves. So what I've done is I've made fingerless gloves, and this is what I'm going to show you. So it's another great option, another way of using the thumb hole, but rather than attaching it to a sweater or a sweatshirt, it's just detached so that you can wear it as a glove. So let me show you how to make them. So I'm going to demonstrate the thumb holes on a pair of fingerless gloves. You can also do this on a sweatshirt, and I'll explain how to translate it to a sweatshirt as I go through the tutorial. But these are sleeves left over from the tank top free pattern that I posted here on my channel. So there was pieces left over from my upcycled tank top, and I kept them with other projects in mind, and this was one of them. So I'm going to start by opening up this underarm seam, so I have a flat piece of fabric to cut my fingerless gloves out from. So this is just going to be for one glove. All I'm going to do is just cut very close to the seam along the underarm there. And now I have actually created a little template for this fingerless glove, which is measuring 32 centimetres by 21 centimetres, so it's just literally a rectangle. And then I've put some marks on, notch marks, where I'm going to leave the opening for the thumb. So that measures 6 centimetres from the top edge, and the thumb hole is 5 centimetres down from that. But I'll just explain those measurements again when we get to that point. But I've just created the template because it makes it easier to cut everything out rather than keeping on marking it on the different types of fabric, because I'm going to cut two, one from each sleeve, and then I'm also going to cut two in my lining fabric, which is just, I'm using just a regular t-shirt weight fabric for the lining of these. I'm just going to pin this in place and cut it out. I'm going to just go as close as I can to that cuff. Put a few pins in there to hold that, and then I'll do the same with the other sleeve, so I've got a pair. So if you were making a cuff for a sweatshirt, you wouldn't necessarily have a lining. You'd make it just one piece and you'd fold it in half. So what I've done here is I've created the final length plus turnings that I want from where my fingerless glove starts to where it finishes. So if it was making it for a sweatshirt, you'd need to measure from where your cuff's going to start to where your sleeve end is, and then you'd want that double because you'd fold that inside to create your cuff. But again, I'll explain that at certain points in the tutorial where it's relevant as well. So I'm just going to cut that out. So I've cut out exactly the same dimensions in a piece of scrap cotton jersey, which has got a good bit of stretch. So if you were making cuffs, you'd probably be making them in self fabric that you're making the t-shirt or the sweatshirt, or you might be using a rib fabric, but any are fine, but obviously it does need to be stretchy for a cuff or a pair of gloves like this. So the next thing I want to do is just mark these notches where I've decided I'm going to put the thumb hole. So because this is knitwear, I think we'll slightly struggle to see the nicks, so I'm actually going to mark those with chalk, and I don't really want it unravelling, just so I can see. I'm going to do it by measurements rather than from the pattern. So I'm just going to mark my 6 centimetres down on this edge, and then 5 centimetres from that notch, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side, so 6 centimetres down from the top and 5 centimetres. And to be honest, even that's not showing up particularly well, so I think I might put a couple of pins in at those points. Then I'm just going to mark them with notches on the lining, because this is a lot thinner and less likely to fray, I think. So 6 and 5. So now we're ready to start sewing it together. I'm just going to take the paper pattern off the back there. And then the first thing I'm going to do is stitch the top together. So this will be the opening of the gloves. If this was a cuff, this would be one extended piece, so it would just be all one piece of fabric, and this would be a fold. So rather than an actual seam, but like I said, because we've got a lining, I'm just going to make this a join. So I'm just going to go and seam that together to start with. You can either use an overlocker or a regular sewing machine with a sort of gentle zigzag or a stretch stitch, but you do want to have a stretch stitch of some sort, because you want this to be able to move with your seam. If you do a straight seam and it does stretch, then the stitches will just break. So I've stitched across the seam. I used a 2 depth zigzag and a 3 length zigzag, so it is very shallow, but just has that little bit of stretch for movement with the fabric. So now what I'm going to do is put the 2 sides together, and I'm going to stitch along the side seam, stopping at the thumb hole, so both on the lining and on the outer. So I'm just going to pin that. So I'm going to line up that seam. And what I'm actually going to do is just put these pins this way so I can see them. That's it. So pinning from the bottom there, and then I'm going to be stopping at this pin here, and I'm going to be doing a good bit of backward stitching there just to make sure that is really strong, because that's the opening of the thumb hole, so it will get a lot of wear and tear, and likewise the top of the thumb hole the same. So then I'm going to carry on, stitch over the seam and stop at this thumb hole, and do the same there. And I'm also going to stitch this with a shallow zigzag. I wouldn't recommend overlocking this seam, because you do want a seam, because we need the seam here to put the 2 holes together to make them enclosed. So if you've got an overlocker stitch, you've got no open seam. So I'm just going to finish pinning that and go away and sew that. So that's stitched and trimmed, and we've got our thumb holes in the lining and in the outer. And like I said, if this was a cuff, it would all be one continuous piece, probably a fair bit shorter than this, but I'm deliberately making these longer to sort of keep my forearms warm. So now we get to the slightly more tricky bit. So to start with, I'm just going to turn them so the inside is facing wrong sides together, so they're as they would be. So if we now put our hand in there, you can see there's our thumb hole. But what we want to do now is join these two seams, which is where it gets a bit tricky. So we want to peel back the top layer and pinch those two together, and now take your hand out so that you can see. So we've got those two aligned, so you want to start at the bottom of that seam, and you're just literally sewing the outer to the lining. But by doing it that way, you can check that you've got the right bit, because it's really easy with these to stitch the wrong lining part to the wrong outer part. So if you've kind of worked through it that way, so you can see the seams actually butting up, then you can go ahead and pin it. And I'm going to stitch that now, and then I'll show you the other side. So I've stitched that side of the thumb hole, so it's just literally the seam length from the top of the thumb hole to the bottom of the thumb hole. So now I'm going to work that back through, double check that we have stitched that in the right place, and you see how it looks. So now if I put my hand in the lining, so a little bit twisted, you can see that this one side is attached to the outer, but this one's still free. So now we need to basically do the same with the other side. So let's just get that a little bit less twisted. There we go, you can see that. So I'm going to go up inside. When I uncover the remaining opening, I can pinch those together. So I can see there I've got my little nick on the lining, and I can bring those two raw edges together and just go and stitch that small piece, so we know we've got them in the right place. It's quite fiddly, but I just think it's better to kind of work it through like that and just check that you're not folding it incorrectly, and that way you know you're sewing up the right piece. So I've stitched that. We can just trim off those ends. Again, I did a good bit of backward stitching at the start and finish to make that nice and strong. So now we should be able to turn that through, and we should have a proper thumb hole that's got stitched on both sides. So it is, that's good. So now if this was going to be a cuff, obviously like I said, it'd probably be a lot shorter. You could just stitch that onto the edge of your sleeve as your pattern states. Now, as this is going to be a fingerless glove, I'm going to turn the ends in, turn the hem at the top, and just pin those together. So I've turned in about 1 centimetre seam there. I'm just going to pin them around, and then I'm going to zigzag these two edges together. I'm pinning this on the inside because I'm going to stitch it on the inside like a hamster in a wheel, so I'll put the sewing machine here and just work round it like that, because it's too small to stretch over the arm of the sewing machine. So I think that'll be a bit easier. And there we have it. So I'm just going to go and stitch that, and then I'll show you the finished item. So that's all stitched, and I can just trim off those ends because I did some back stitching to secure that. And there's a very quick little fingerless glove, which is great for the winter. Nice repurposing of the sleeves of that jumper that I used for the tank top. And here's the other one. There we go. So I think those will keep my hands nice and warm in the winter. I quite like wearing these when I'm working, because obviously you've got your fingers free, but you've got the extra warmth that's covering some of your hand, so they're really useful. I've got the added bonus that I've used up a bit of the scrap left over from my tank top project as well. So if you've got any comments, please feel free to leave them below the video, and if you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.